Have you ever had someone insult you, and even hours later their words were still living rent-free inside your head? Maybe someone questioned your intelligence, mocked your appearance, disrespected you in front of other people, or said something so personal that you immediately felt the urge to fight back. And then you replayed the conversation again and again. I should have said this. I should have put them in their place. Why did I let them talk to me like that? The strange part is that the insult may have lasted only 10 seconds, but your emotional reaction can last for hours, sometimes even days. And this is exactly where most people lose. Not when the insult is spoken, but when they allow another person's words to take control of their mind. The Stoics understood something most people never learn. You don't have to win every argument to protect your dignity. In fact, sometimes the strongest person in the room is the one who refuses to become emotionally controlled by the weakest person's behavior. Today, you're going to learn 3 Stoic responses that can completely change the way you deal with insults, disrespect, and provocation. And the third response is especially powerful because it doesn't just stop the insult. It teaches you how to remain in control when someone is deliberately trying to make you lose it. So stay until the end, because the goal isn't simply to learn how to respond to insults. It's to become the kind of person insults can no longer control. If you're tired of letting other people's opinions control your emotions, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Stoic Mind. Every lesson here is designed to help you become calmer, stronger, wiser, and more difficult to manipulate. Because once you learn to control your reactions, you begin to control much more than just an argument. Why insults have so much power? An insult is just a collection of words. But somehow, those words can feel heavier than they should. Why? Because when someone insults you, they're often not attacking your ears. They're attacking your identity. They want you to question yourself. They want you to become defensive. They want you to explain yourself. They want you to prove that they're wrong. And sometimes, without realizing it, you give them exactly what they wanted. Think about what happens when someone says, "You're not good enough." Your mind immediately starts building a courtroom. You become the defendant. You start collecting evidence. Actually, I'm successful. I've accomplished this. You don't know what I've been through. Let me explain myself. But notice what just happened. You allowed a stranger's opinion to become a trial over your worth. The Stoics approached this completely differently. They understood that other people have opinions, judgments, moods, and impulses. But none of those things belong to you. Your responsibility is not to control what enters another person's mouth. Your responsibility is to control what happens inside your own mind. That distinction changes everything. Because once you understand it, an insult stops being an emergency. It becomes a choice. You can react, or you can respond. And those two things may look similar from the outside, but psychologically, they come from completely different places. Imagine 2 people standing in the same room. Someone insults both of them. The first person immediately becomes angry. His voice rises. His heart beats faster. He starts defending himself. The insult has now become a battle. The second person pauses. He looks at the person. He takes a breath. And he thinks, "Does this person deserve control over my emotional state?" That single pause creates distance between the insult and the reaction. And inside that distance is freedom. This is one of the deepest ideas in Stoicism. You cannot always control what happens to you. But you can train yourself to control your judgment about what happens. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly reminded himself not to become disturbed by the behavior of others. Not because disrespect doesn't exist, but because surrendering your peace to someone else's behavior is another form of slavery. And that brings us to the first response. Response 1: Silence. The first Stoic response is the simplest. Silence. Not weak silence. Not fearful silence. Not the silence of someone who doesn't know what to say. The silence of someone who knows they don't need to prove themselves. There are people who insult you because they genuinely want to communicate something. But there are others who insult you because they want a reaction. They are not looking for understanding. They're looking for emotional access. They want to press a button and watch you move. And every time you explode, argue, defend yourself, or become visibly upset, you teach them that the button works. That's why silence can be so powerful. It removes the reward. Imagine someone saying something disrespectful to you in front of a group. Everyone waits for your reaction. They expect anger. They expect an argument. They expect you to defend yourself. Instead, you simply look at the person calmly, pause, and say nothing. Suddenly, the emotional momentum disappears. The person may even become uncomfortable because they no longer know what to do next. Why? Because their insult was designed to create a reaction, and you refuse to participate. This doesn't mean you should tolerate abuse. It doesn't mean you should remain silent when someone repeatedly violates an important boundary. Stoicism is not passive weakness. Sometimes the strongest response is to walk away. Sometimes it's to establish a boundary. Sometimes it's to speak firmly. But you should never confuse emotional reaction with strength. There is a difference between choosing silence and being unable to respond. The first is discipline. The second is fear. And here's the psychological secret. When you don't react immediately, you regain control over the situation. Your nervous system gets time to settle. Your emotions stop making decisions for you. And you can finally ask the question that matters. What response actually serves me? Not, how do I hurt them back? But, what is the strongest thing I can do now? Sometimes the answer is nothing. And nothing can be incredibly powerful. The second response. But what happens when the insult contains some truth? This is where many people struggle. Because not every criticism is completely false. Sometimes someone says something unpleasant about you, and buried inside their delivery is information you need to hear. The Stoic doesn't reject truth simply because it arrived through an unpleasant voice. Instead, he examines it. Which leads to the second response. Response 2, calm acknowledgement. Calm acknowledgement means refusing to become defensive while examining what was actually said. Imagine someone tells you, "You're terrible at communicating." Your emotional instinct might be, "What are you talking about? I'm not terrible at communicating." You immediately defend your identity. But a Stoic might pause and think, is there anything useful in that statement? Maybe there is. Maybe you interrupt people. Maybe you become defensive during difficult conversations. Maybe you sometimes speak without listening. If that's true, the insult accidentally revealed an opportunity for growth. And if it's completely false, then you lose nothing by remaining calm. You simply let the statement pass. This is powerful because it makes you difficult to manipulate. Think about it. If someone can insult you and instantly make you defend your identity, they can control the conversation. But if you can calmly examine their words without emotionally accepting them, they lose that power. You can say, "Maybe," or "I'll think about that," or simply, "I hear you." Notice how different that feels from arguing. You're not agreeing. You're not surrendering. You're not admitting that they're right. You're simply refusing to become emotionally trapped. And that is emotional intelligence. A mature person doesn't need every accusation to be false. They only need to know what is true, what is false, and what deserves their attention. This is where Stoicism becomes more than ancient philosophy. It becomes a psychological shield. Because your ego wants certainty. It wants to say, "I'm right. They're wrong. End of story." But wisdom is more comfortable saying, "Let me examine this." That mindset makes you stronger. Because you can learn from criticism without becoming destroyed by it. You can reject an insult without rejecting useful information. And you can accept a mistake without believing that the mistake defines who you are. There's another important distinction here. Someone can be wrong about your worth while being right about one of your weaknesses. Let that sink in. A person might insult you because they dislike you. That doesn't mean every word they say is false. And it also doesn't mean their opinion defines your identity. Take the lesson. Leave the poison. That is calm acknowledgement. Now think about your own life for a moment. What's the insult or disrespect you still remember because you wish you had responded differently? Have you ever allowed someone's words to ruin your entire day? Tell me in the comments. Your experience might help someone else realize they're not the only person learning how to control their reactions. And remember this, the goal isn't to become emotionless. It's to become emotionally disciplined. Response 3, controlled response. Now we reach the third response. And this is the one you need when silence isn't enough. Because sometimes someone crosses a boundary. Sometimes you need to answer. Sometimes walking away isn't practical. And sometimes saying nothing may actually allow disrespect to continue. This is where the Stoic uses a controlled response. The key word is controlled. Not angry. Not defensive. Not insulting. Controlled. Imagine someone says, "You're completely useless." The average response is, "Look who's talking." Now you have two people attacking each other. The conversation has stopped being about anything meaningful. It has become emotional combat. But imagine responding. "If you have a specific issue with what I did, tell me directly." That's different. You're not insulting them. You're not begging for approval. You're not trying to win. You're establishing a boundary. Or imagine someone says, "You always mess everything up." Instead of defending your entire existence, you say, "If there's a specific mistake, we can discuss it. I'm not interested in personal attacks." Short. Calm. Firm. Then stop talking. That's the power of controlled response. You don't match their emotional intensity. You don't descend to their level. You communicate the boundary and allow your composure to speak for you. This is especially important because anger often creates a second problem. The original insult may have been small, but your angry reaction can become the story everyone remembers. You may start with someone disrespecting you. Then you shout. They record it. People see only your reaction. Now suddenly you're explaining why you lost control. The insult created the situation, but your reaction created the consequences. The Stoic tries to prevent that second mistake. He understands that dignity is not about making sure nobody ever disrespects you. That's impossible. Dignity is about refusing to become someone you don't respect just because someone else behaved badly. Think about that. If someone behaves cruelly, and you respond with cruelty, what exactly have you gained? Maybe temporary satisfaction. But you've allowed their behavior to dictate your character. The Stoic asks a better question. Who do I want to be in this moment? That question changes the entire experience. Instead of asking, how can I hurt this person? You ask, how can I protect my dignity without abandoning my principles? That is strength. The hidden psychology of provocation. There is another reason these responses work. Provocation depends on predictability. If someone knows exactly how you'll react, they can manipulate the interaction. They know which words trigger you. They know what subjects make you defensive. They know how to make you angry. But emotional discipline makes you unpredictable. Not chaotic. Calmly unpredictable. You don't respond according to their script. They expect anger. You give silence. They expect defensiveness. You give acknowledgement. They expect an argument. You give a calm boundary. And suddenly, the entire dynamic changes. This is why the real victory isn't making the other person feel bad. The real victory is maintaining command over yourself. Because if you need someone else to regret insulting you before you can feel powerful, then they still control your emotional state. True freedom is different. You can walk away without revenge. You can hear criticism without collapsing. You can face disrespect without becoming disrespectful. You can be misunderstood without desperately explaining yourself. And you can be insulted without allowing the insult to become your identity. That is emotional strength. So how do you actually practice this in everyday life? Start with the 3-second rule. When someone says something that triggers you, don't answer immediately. Take 3 seconds. Breathe. Observe your emotion. Then ask, do I need to respond? If the answer is no, use silence. If there is useful information inside the criticism, acknowledge it calmly. If a boundary needs to be established, respond firmly without anger. Second, stop explaining yourself unnecessarily. You don't need to write a 10-minute defense of your character every time someone misunderstands you. Sometimes, "That's not accurate," is enough. Sometimes, "I disagree," is enough. And sometimes no response is necessary at all. Third, practice emotional distance. At the end of each day, think about one moment when someone irritated you. Ask yourself, what did I control? What did I fail to control? How could I respond better next time? You're training your mind. And like any training, repetition matters. At first, you may still get angry. That's normal. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is to create a larger space between the trigger and your reaction. Eventually, that space becomes your strength. You begin noticing the insult without immediately becoming the insulted person. You hear the words. You observe the emotion. You choose your response. And over time, something remarkable happens. People may still try to provoke you, but they stop getting the same version of you. The next time someone insults you, remember these 3 responses. Silence. Not because you're weak, but because not every battle deserves your energy. Calm acknowledgement. Not because they're automatically right, but because you are strong enough to examine criticism without allowing it to define you. And controlled response. Not because you are afraid to fight back, but because you understand that your character is more important than winning an emotional argument. You will encounter disrespect. You will encounter people who misunderstand you. You will encounter people who deliberately try to provoke you. That's part of life. You cannot control every mouth. You cannot control every opinion. You cannot control how people treat you. But you can control what happens next. And that is where your power begins. The strongest person isn't necessarily the loudest person in the room. It's the person who can feel anger without becoming anger. The person who can hear an insult without immediately needing revenge. The person who can walk away without needing the last word. Marcus Aurelius didn't become powerful because nobody criticized him. He became powerful because he refused to let other people's behavior determine the quality of his character. And you can practice the same principle. The next time someone tries to pull you into an emotional battle, pause. Take a breath. Remember that you have a choice. You don't have to prove yourself. You don't have to match their anger. You don't have to become what you're fighting against. Sometimes your silence is the answer. Sometimes your calm acknowledgement is the answer. And sometimes your controlled boundary is the answer. But whatever you choose, make sure the decision comes from strength rather than emotion. Because the ultimate goal of Stoicism isn't to teach you how to win arguments. It's to teach you how to become a person who no longer needs to lose himself in them. And when you reach that point, an insult becomes just words. Someone else's opinion becomes just an opinion. And your peace becomes something they cannot take from you. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this video helped you see insults, criticism, and disrespect differently, like the video and subscribe to Stoic Mind for more lessons on emotional control, discipline, resilience, and self-mastery. Share this video with someone who needs to stop giving other people's words control over their peace. And when you're ready, watch the next Stoic lesson on screen and keep building the mind that life cannot easily shake.